Now, no matter how many times this gospel reading of Jesus' Beatitudes in Luke or its counterpart in Matthew's gospel are proclaimed, it appears to turn everything upside down, to be a contradiction in terms. I mean, to describe the poor, hungry, sorrowful, and rejected as blessed, and the rich, full, happy, and well-respected as woeful. In order to better understand this gospel, we need to look back at some context and forward to the question directed to each of us of how and where we find our blessedness and worth, our true sense of being right with God and one another. Regarding context, we see that Beatitudes, or blessings and woes, were a specific genre commonly found in Hebrew scriptures before the time of Jesus. For example, in today's first reading in Jeremiah, and in Daniel and Tobit and elsewhere. And then adopted by Christian writers. These consisted of a pronouncement of blessedness or woe, followed by who is blessed or cursed and why. Blessings or woes, in either case, these were not really moral or ethical directives per se. They are not exhortations or prescriptions to be someone or to do something. For example, to become poor or hungry or sorrowful. Rather, they are an exchange of divine friendship, as it were, and encouragement or warning, and an assessment, a description of the way things are, which in our gospel turns out to be upside down, the opposite of the way things seem. Jesus sure seems to turn everything upside down as he bucks the very popular perception found, for example, in the book of Deuteronomy and present in his day and in ours, which believed that physical and material well-being were signs of God's blessings upon particular people. Being rich, full, happy, and well-respected was considered to be blessed by God, and conversely, being poor, hungry, sorrowful, and rejected were considered to be punishment by God and curses for some earlier misdeeds. Jesus challenges this perspective by reversing the blessings and woes. Here he repudiates not only the notion that the poor and downtrodden deserve their unfortunate state, he also repudiates the linkage between God's blessings and those who are full and seem to have it all. Jesus, though, is not simply overturning the whole order of things and now blessing the poor because of their poverty and cursing the rich because of their wealth. No. Instead, he has a more comprehensive message that affects everyone equally, though not in exactly the same way. He is calling each and everyone to whom he gives a blessing or a woe to look at where their sense of blessedness, their sense of self-worth or value really lies. To those who have little or nothing left to lose, he says, "Blessed are you," hoping that they might more readily see their sense of self-worth, their blessedness, their God-given belovedness rooted in God's unconditional love. And to those who are wealthy, full, well-respected, his statements of woe to you express not a judgment against wealth and social respectability in themselves, but rather an expression of the same hope that these people will not wrap their whole sense of self-worth and value, their sense of blessedness and belovedness, around the pursuit of wealth, fullness, happiness, and respectability, but rather on God, in whom lies their deepest sense of meaning and worth. It's an upside-down world in the eyes of God. And the only way to persevere in God's upside-down world is to put down deep roots, roots of faith. For think of actually being turned upside down. It's only the rooted that can hold on. Following Jeremiah's imagery in our first reading, we are called to reach below the surface of what appears to be of value, so that we can discover much deeper sources of worth, and in that discovery find our deepest roots that will not let go in a world where we may have to weather strong winds of uncertainty or upheaval, or the iciness of cold sadness that could toss us over, or the drought times that bring doubt. We are called by Jesus in these Beatitudes to be well rooted in what will give true worth and lasting value, not like desert shrubs that take flight as tumbleweeds when the parched season comes, blown by winds of fear. So plant yourself where you will be fed by streams of God's love and power, Jeremiah proclaims. So where and how do we find our worth and our value, our blessedness and belovedness? Well, today's readings pose exactly this question. Our gospel presents some options. Do we find our worth in seeking a fat bank account or lucrative investments? Do we find our worth in filling our stomachs? Do we find our worth in seeking the good opinions of others? Do we find our worth in structure and predictable ways of living, or in having no structure at all? Where and how do we find our worth? Our gospel is clear. If we seek our true worth in any of these things, in plenty, in good times, in good reputation, then woe to us. And Jeremiah proclaims that the blessed person finds his or her worth solely in God. But what makes God so trustworthy? What makes God the source of real blessedness and worth, and all the things of this world so inept by comparison? St. Paul, in our second reading, minces no words when he states that the God we worship, the God we know through Jesus Christ, has broken the power of death. You see, the ultimate test for anything that invites our ultimate trust and claims to be the true source of our sense of worth and blessedness is this: what can it do about death? All the merely mortal things of this world that want to be our gods, our source of good, that to which our heart clings and finds its meaning, Well, they go out the window when death knocks at the door. They cannot deliver on their promises because death will intervene. They cannot reach us beyond the grave. The only God worthy of our ultimate trust and our ultimate source of blessedness is the God who has broken the power of death and come back from the grave to affirm a never-ending love for us. And thus, St. Paul specifies that the blessed person can find his or her value through faith in the resurrected Jesus. This perspective on where our true worth rests in Jesus and his resurrection has vast implications for us. For if God is to be the ultimate source of our worth, our blessedness, then that implies that God accepts us totally and completely as we are, without fail, without condition, in all circumstances, as we are. That awareness of God as the true source of our worth, our blessedness, means that we can know that blessedness even now, in whatever circumstances or situations we're in, whether joyful or painful, having or not having. Today's readings proclaim this simple truth, that the greatest obstacle to the Spirit of the risen Christ working through us is when we say to ourselves, in one way or another, that we are worthless. It is our self-rejection that leaves us grasping for things or scavenging for plenty, begging for acceptance or approval or consolation, or as the song goes, looking for love in all the wrong places. But the good news in our readings today is that for each and every one of us, exactly because God accepts us as we are, here and now, and loves us unconditionally even in our failing and falling and dying, God alone is the source of our true worth and value, our true blessedness and belovedness. As I said last week, God doesn't necessarily call those who are worthy. Rather, God makes worthy those whom God calls. And he calls everyone. And God has created a circle of blessing that is only completed when we bless God by responding in love. God's blessing, God's bestowal of divine friendship and worth, we do not return empty to God. We reciprocate by our response of faith, which has us dig deeply into our lives and communities and share that deeper sense of blessedness. And so we also need blessed, worth-laden, value-driven families, religious institutions, schools and community organizations to be the bases from which we deepen our roots in our own self-worth. From these, we can build the capacity to act maturely in the wider culture and society on all that we hold as having worth and value, thus promoting the dignity of all humanity and God's creation. Then, as both our Psalm and Jeremiah proclaim, we can affirm, quote, "Blessed are those who trust in the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. It shall not fear when heat comes, and its leaves shall stay green. In the year of drought, it is not anxious, and it does not cease to bear fruit. Amen. Using the form on page 53 in the Book of Common Prayer, let us rise as we proclaim our faith, saying together the Apostles' Creed.